"Sir, your access level doesn't match this section. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The words fell like a gavel in the private client lounge at Sterling and Rowe Bank. Heads turned. A couple near the espresso bar glanced over their shoulders, eyes narrowing in subtle judgment. Malcolm Royce didn't stand. 6'2", tailored charcoal suit cut to his frame, Windsor not precise, Italian Oxfords catching the light. A Patek Philippe peeked from beneath his cuff as he adjusted the slim handle of his calfskin briefcase. Not a twitch in his expression. He could have been sitting in a boardroom, not in the middle of someone else's presumption. The manager, who had spoken, a shorter man in a pinstripe suit, expression already tense, held his ground. "On what basis?" Malcolm asked, voice even. "Protocol," the man replied, crisp and final, as if the word itself were law. He adjusted his cufflinks. "And if protocol is wrong?" A pause. The manager's jaw set. "Then it will be corrected by the proper channels." "Not here. Not now." From the far side of the room, a woman in a cream blazer watched intently. A client, maybe late 50s, silver hair in an immaculate twist. She frowned slightly. "Before we go on, I want you to think about this. If you were in Malcolm's seat right now, what would you say? What would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit the like button and subscribe. Your voice keeps these moments alive. Now, back to Malcolm. He'd seen this before. At 28, trying to wire capital for his first acquisition, told to use the public window. At 35, in a hotel lobby, dressed just as well, still mistaken for security detail. And now, again, earlier, when he first stepped into the lounge, the reception had been polite in tone but not in intent. "Sir, this area is for verified high-net-worth clients only," the receptionist had said, her smile thin, professional in the way a locked door is polite. She hadn't checked her screen before making the judgment. Behind her, a junior teller looked up from her monitor, then back down quickly. Two men in bespoke suits, seated near the corner, exchanged glances. One raised a brow, the other smirked. "I'll wait," Malcolm had said simply, moving to one of the leather chairs in the center of the lounge. He unbuttoned his jacket with a single motion, sat, and rested one ankle over his knee. The briefcase settled against the chair leg like a sentinel. "Security's on standby," the receptionist murmured into her desk phone, just low enough to make plausible deniability part of the performance. Malcolm didn't respond. He took out his phone, thumb hovering, then set it face down on the armrest. At the service bar, a young man in a navy blazer and sneakers nudged his friend. "Watch this," he whispered, angling his phone camera discreetly. The red recording light flicked on. The air in the lounge shifted. Not loud yet, but charged. And Malcolm, perfectly still in his tailored armor, let the storm come to him. The manager's words hung in the air like static, sharp enough to sting but not enough to draw blood. Malcolm didn't blink. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, not for his wallet, but for a slim black folder. The junior teller's gaze flicked up again. His lips parted, as if he wanted to say something, then closed. Behind him, the receptionist kept her eyes fixed on her monitor, fingers tapping keys that weren't moving the situation forward. From the far corner, the young man filming whispered, "This is wild," to his friend. The red light on his phone glowed brighter, in the reflection of the glass divider. "Sir, if you won't comply," the manager pressed, "I'll have to involve security." Malcolm's response was mild, but it was the kind of mild that made the skin between someone's shoulder blades tighten. "Then perhaps you should." The silver-haired woman in the cream blazer set down her magazine completely now. "Excuse me," she said to the manager. "I believe I've seen this gentleman before." Her tone wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the room's focus tilt toward her. The manager's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, we have protocols, and I have eyes," she replied, turning back to Malcolm with a knowing look. The glass doors to the lounge hissed open. A man in a dark blazer with a security badge stepped inside, scanning the room. "We have an issue?" he asked. The receptionist spoke before anyone else could. "Potential unverified client, attempting to access restricted area." Malcolm leaned back in his chair, one hand resting casually on the calfskin briefcase. "You say that like it's a crime." "It can be," the security officer said. Or it can be a mistake, Malcolm answered. The young man filming took a half step forward. He's done nothing wrong. I've been recording since he walked in. The manager shot him a warning look. Put that phone away. The young man didn't. Why? So no one sees how you're treating him. The silver-haired woman rose from her seat. I'd like to know exactly what you think this man has done to warrant security. The manager's voice grew sharper. This is an internal matter. That's your first error. Malcolm cut in, his voice still calm but with an edge now. You've made it a spectacle. In a room full of clients, the security officer hesitated. He glanced at the manager, then at Malcolm, then at the gathering ring of onlookers. From the reception desk, a faint chime sounded. The receptionist checked her screen, frowned. Sir, I'm not seeing. Malcolm tilted his head. That's because you're looking in the wrong system. She blinked. Excuse me. He reached for his phone, tapped once, and spoke into it with the ease of a man placing an order he'd made 100 times before. Caleb, Phase 1. A crisp voice came back through his AirPods. Engaged. Board has been notified. The security officer's posture shifted, something like caution creeping in. The manager's eyes darted between Malcolm and the officer. I suggest, Malcolm said, rising now with unhurried precision, you verify again. He adjusted his cufflinks as he stepped forward, the scent of polished leather and understated cologne following him. Because the next action you take will define more than just this moment. The room was silent enough to hear the faint hum of the espresso machine. Even the young man's phone seemed to pause in his grip. The silver-haired woman's lips curved in the smallest of smiles. She didn't need to say she knew exactly who Malcolm Royce was. Her expression said it for her. The manager's Adam's apple bobbed as he stepped back half a pace. You can't just. I can, Malcolm said evenly, and I will if this continues. The silver-haired woman folded her arms, watching him with an expression that balanced curiosity and satisfaction. She wasn't smiling outright, but she wasn't hiding her approval either. From the service bar, a man in a gray hoodie leaned forward. Hey, he called toward the security officer. Maybe check his name before you keep pushing him out the door. The officer's gaze swept the room. Sir, please sit down. Why? The man in the hoodie replied. So you can pretend you didn't mess up? The receptionist shifted uncomfortably behind the desk. We have to verify through Central. Malcolm's phone vibrated once. He glanced at the screen, then at the manager. You might want to answer that call coming in from your regional director. The manager's jaw worked, but he didn't move toward the phone. From Malcolm's AirPods, Caleb's voice returned. Crisp. Phase 1 confirmed. Audit team is standing by. All conversation in the lounge is being logged. That drew murmurs from the clients seated along the far wall. One woman whispered to her husband. He shook his head in disbelief. The security officer straightened, as if realizing he'd walked into something larger than an unverified account. Sir, he asked Malcolm, do you have identification? Malcolm met his eyes, steady. Do you have reason? A beat of silence. The young man with the phone camera stepped closer, his voice gaining confidence. They haven't even looked him up. They just saw him walk in and decided he didn't belong. Put that down. The manager barked. No, the young man replied, louder now. Everyone should see this. The silver-haired woman's voice cut through the low rumble. You're making a scene, not him. The manager spun toward her. With respect, ma'am. You've shown none. She snapped back. Gasps rippled through the lounge. Malcolm moved then not with haste, but with the deliberate grace of someone who'd been patient long enough. He closed the black folder in his hand and set it gently on the desk between them. Open it, he said. The receptionist glanced at the manager. He hesitated, then motioned for her to do it. She flipped the cover back, and her face drained of color. Inside, embossed in gold on heavy stock, was a corporate seal. Beneath it, a title in bold, Chairman and Majority Shareholder, Sterling and Roe Bank Holdings. Her voice faltered. This can't. It can, Malcolm said quietly. And it is. The silver-haired woman gave a single nod, as if the final piece of a puzzle had clicked into place. Around them, the murmurs grew into a low, steady hum. Clients pulled out their own phones not to record in secret, but openly. The way you do when you know you're witnessing something no one will believe without proof. The manager swallowed hard. We didn't know that. Malcolm replied, his tone still calm but heavier now. Is exactly the problem. The manager's voice cracked on the next word. Mr. Royce, if we had known. You didn't ask, Malcolm said. His gaze swept the room, not to the clients but to every staff member within sight. You assumed. The receptionist lowered her eyes. The junior teller shifted in his chair, looking like he wanted to melt into the carpet. From the far wall, the young man with the phone spoke again. So what happens now? Malcolm turned to him, the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. Now, we correct the record. Caleb's voice came through Malcolm's AirPods, clear enough that those closest could hear. Sir, the board is monitoring. Compliance has joined the call. Your authorization for immediate branch action is confirmed. The murmurs surged. The silver-haired woman sat straighter, her expression unshaken. Good, she said under her breath. Malcolm stepped forward, closing the distance to the manager until the only thing between them was the black folder on the desk. You will release every client still waiting in the lobby to this lounge. Effective immediately. The manager's lips parted, a protest ready. But he caught the look in Malcolm's eyes and swallowed it whole. Yes, sir. The security officer glanced at the manager, then back at Malcolm. Do you still want me here? Malcolm didn't even look at him. You're dismissed from this matter. Go back to your post. The man hesitated, then stepped aside, his badge glinting once before disappearing out the door. The receptionist's voice was small. And, the account verification? Malcolm's tone didn't rise. Run it, so you can see how wrong you've been. She reached for the keyboard with trembling fingers. Within seconds, her monitor flashed green. Her breath caught. The young man filming tilted his phone toward the screen. There it is, verified. Executive tier. The silver-haired woman gave a satisfied nod. Exactly as I thought. Malcolm let the moment stretch, the quiet pressing in on everyone who had stood against him minutes before. Every second of what happened here is already in the system. Every word, every decision. The junior teller spoke up at last, voice low but carrying. It wasn't right. I knew it when it started, and I should have said something. Malcolm's eyes softened, just a fraction. Then remember that, next time. From his AirPods, Caleb again. Sir, per protocol, you may reassign branch leadership immediately. Malcolm's gaze returned to the manager. You will vacate your position. Effective now. Your access will be revoked before you leave this building. Gasps rippled through the lounge. The manager's face drained, his shoulders sagging as if the weight he'd carried had turned to stone. Malcolm buttoned his jacket, his voice still steady. Respect is not an amenity you grant at your discretion. It's the baseline. Fail it, and you fail here. The lounge was silent but for the faint hum of the espresso machine. Power had shifted. Permanently. The manager didn't move. His fingers twitched against the edge of the desk, like they were still clinging to a job already gone. Malcolm didn't repeat himself. He simply glanced toward the receptionist. Log his termination now. HR will receive the record in real time. She hesitated, then began typing. The manager's eyes flicked to her screen, watching his own access vanish line by line. Across the room, the silver-haired woman spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. This isn't punishment, this is accountability. The young man with the phone camera caught her words, his lens trained on the manager's pale face. People need to see what happens when you treat clients like suspects, he said. Malcolm turned, taking in the entire lounge, the clients, the staff, the bystanders who'd lingered, instead of retreating. If you're still here, he said, you've witnessed exactly why this branch is about to change. The junior teller swallowed hard. Sir, if I may. Go ahead, Malcolm said. I should have spoken sooner, the teller admitted. I saw your name in the system. I knew you belonged here. I stayed quiet because... He trailed off. Because it was easier, Malcolm finished for him. And because silence feels safe until it isn't. From his AirPods, Caleb's voice returned, steady. Sir, Compliance requests you address all present before the branch status changes. Malcolm gave a single nod. He stepped away from the desk, positioning himself where every seat in the lounge had a clear view. "This will be brief," he said. "You've all just watched a sequence of assumptions escalate into public humiliation. Not because of evidence, not because of protocol that was applied fairly, but because someone decided I didn't look like I belonged. That decision cost them their position, and it will cost more if it's repeated." The silver-haired woman's lips pressed into a firm line. Malcolm continued, "Sterling and Rowe doesn't survive on marble floors or polished brass. It survives on trust. When you strip that away, the rest is just furniture. From this moment, this branch will operate under direct oversight from my office. Staff will be retrained, leadership replaced, and clients treated according to fact, not perception." Gasps and murmurs moved through the room. The manager found his voice, brittle and low. "You've made your point." Malcolm's gaze locked on him. "Not yet. The point is that what happened here doesn't vanish when I walk out. It stays in your record, in the systems you thought would protect you, and in the minds of everyone who saw it." He looked to the receptionist, who sat rigid. "That includes you. Decide now if you're part of the problem or the solution." She nodded quickly. "The solution, sir." "Good," Malcolm said. "Then act like it." The room was still again, but it wasn't the same stillness as before. The air now carried weight, a warning, a promise, and the unmistakable knowledge that the quiet man in the suit had rewritten the rules in less than an hour. Malcolm's phone buzzed once more. Caleb's voice was calm, but the words carried weight. "Sir, the board confirms full authority for branch shutdown. Effective when you give the word." The manager's head snapped up. "Shutdown? You can't." Malcolm didn't even look at him. "It's already in motion. What happens next is just formality." The silver-haired woman leaned forward in her chair, hands clasped over her knee. "Then say it," she urged quietly, almost to herself. Malcolm turned toward the receptionist. "Pull up the branch operations dashboard." Now, she obeyed, fingers flying over the keyboard until the screen glowed with a full schematic of the bank's local systems, transactions, staff logins, security feeds. "Caleb," Malcolm said into the AirPods. "Phase 2. A chime echoed from the receptionist's computer. The status indicators on her screen began flipping red one by one. Account access suspended. New transactions halted. Outbound transfers frozen. A low murmur rippled through the clients in the room. "What's happening?" a man near the espresso bar asked, half whispering. "The branch is being shut down," the young man with the phone replied, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. The manager took a step toward Malcolm, desperation bleeding into his tone. "You're punishing everyone for one mistake." Malcolm's eyes cut to him, cold but steady. "One mistake? You call this one mistake? This was a chain of choices, each one yours to stop, and you didn't." The junior teller's voice wavered. "Sir, what happens to us?" "Those who acted in good faith will be reassigned," Malcolm said. "Those who didn't will answer for it." The silver-haired woman looked around at the other clients. "I think we can all agree that's more mercy than most would give." From the desk speaker, Caleb's voice came again. "Operational lockdown complete. Awaiting your directive for personnel action." Malcolm stepped back toward the center of the lounge, his presence filling the space without a raised voice. "Effective immediately, the current branch manager is terminated. Interim leadership will be flown in today. Compliance will conduct interviews with each staff member. You will answer truthfully, or you will leave with him." He let his gaze sweep the room, making eye contact with the receptionist, the junior teller, even the security officer who had returned quietly to stand near the door. "This bank exists to serve," Malcolm said. "The moment it forgets that, it doesn't deserve to operate. That's why we're resetting it here and now." The receptionist's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Sir, we're officially offline." Malcolm gave a single nod. "Then lock the doors." Gasps broke out. The manager's shoulders slumped as the silver-haired woman rose to her feet, standing like a witness to the closing of a chapter. Malcolm picked up his briefcase, the soft leather whispering against his palm. "It's over for now. But the memory of this will follow you longer than any shutdown." The click of the lock echoed through the lounge like a final verdict. Conversations dropped into whispers. Somewhere in the back, the espresso machine hissed once, then fell silent. Malcolm stood in the center of the room, the briefcase in one hand, his other resting loosely at his side. He didn't look rushed. He didn't need to. The room belonged to him now. The silver-haired woman stepped closer. "I hope you know," she said. "This isn't just about you. You've just shown every person here that silence has a cost." Malcolm met her gaze. "That's the point." The young man with the phone lowered it slightly, shaking his head with a half-smile. "Man, this is going everywhere. People need to see this." "Make sure they do," Malcolm replied. The manager hovered near the wall, as far from the desk as possible. His eyes darted between the clients and the door, like he couldn't decide which was more dangerous. The junior teller cleared his throat. "Sir, for what it's worth, I'll tell compliance exactly what I saw." Malcolm nodded once. "That's how you start fixing what you let happen." A woman in a red silk blouse, seated near the corner, raised her voice. "You've got my respect, Mr. Royce. Most people with power don't use it like this." "Most people don't have to," Malcolm said. "I shouldn't have to." From his AirPods, Caleb's voice came one last time. "Press is already calling the main office. Statement draft will be in your inbox within the hour." Malcolm glanced around at the assembled faces, some humbled, some admiring, some still processing what they'd just witnessed. "Let them call," he said. "I don't need a press release to tell the truth. The truth is in this room." The silver-haired woman smiled faintly, a gesture of respect more than warmth. "You'll be back, if I need to," Malcolm said. "And if I don't, it's because this place learned its lesson." He walked toward the glass doors, his stride unhurried. The security officer stepped aside, holding the handle open without being asked. As Malcolm crossed the threshold, the low murmur of voices swelled behind him. "That was the owner?" Someone whispered. "Chairman," another corrected. Out on the polished marble of the main lobby, clients from the public area were peering in, trying to glimpse the man whose name they'd just heard carried on the air like rumor. The young man with the phone emerged seconds later, already speaking into his camera, his tone electric. "You're not gonna believe what just went down in there." Malcolm didn't stop. He passed through the lobby, past the tellers who froze mid-transaction to watch him, past the security desk where the guards straightened instinctively. As the revolving doors swept him toward the street, daylight spilled across the sharp lines of his suit. He adjusted his cufflinks one last time. On the sidewalk, Caleb's black sedan was already waiting at the curb. The driver stepped out to open the rear door. Malcolm paused only long enough to look back at the bank's glass facade. His reflection stared back calm, composed, and utterly unshaken. Then he stepped into the car. The door closed, and Sterling and Roe Bank receded behind him like the scene of a trial whose verdict had been delivered without a jury. By the time Caleb's sedan merged into midday traffic, Malcolm's phone was alive with notifications, a dozen missed calls, twice as many unread messages. And in the corner of the screen, a steady flood of social media tags bearing his name. From the front seat, Caleb glanced back. "It's already out there. The clip's been reposted 8 times in the last 10 minutes. Malcolm scrolled once. The video was short, just under a minute, but it was enough. The manager's voice denying him. The silver-haired woman's defense. The moment the gold embossed seal came into view, captions had been added already. "He owns the bank." Caleb's voice cut through. "Press is asking for a comment." Malcolm leaned back against the leather seat, eyes still on the phone. They just watched it. What more is there to say? "They'll want the official line. They'll get the truth," Malcolm said, "just not dressed up for them." Outside the car window, Manhattan moved at its usual pace: cabs, couriers, tourists. But Malcolm knew the story moving through phones and inboxes was traveling faster than any of them. In a high-rise 3 blocks away, a group of Sterling and Roe executives were gathered around a conference table, the video playing on loop. Someone muted it, the silence heavier than the sound. "This will trend," one of them said grimly. "It's already trending," another replied. Back in the sedan, Caleb answered a call on speaker. A voice Malcolm recognized. The CEO of the parent holding company came through, careful and measured. "Malcolm, I've just seen the footage. You handled yourself impeccably. Malcolm said nothing. We'll be issuing a corporate statement by the end of the day, the voice continued. And we're initiating a review across all branches. Malcolm finally spoke. Start with the ones that think a suit tells you everything about the man wearing it. There was a pause, then a quiet acknowledgement. Understood. Caleb ended the call. You know this isn't going to fade quickly. Good, Malcolm said. It shouldn't. At the next intersection, a pedestrian recognized the sedan, phone in hand. She mouthed something. Caleb caught it in the rearview mirror. That's him. Within minutes, the clip hit national news feeds. The headline was clean, almost understated. Bank chairman denied service in his own lounge, closes branch on the spot. In comment sections, the arguments had already begun. Some called it justice, others called it overreach. But buried in the noise were voices from people who'd lived something similar, voices Malcolm had expected, because he'd been one of them once. The sedan turned down a quieter street, heading toward his office tower. Caleb's phone buzzed again. Reporters are outside the building. They can wait, Malcolm said, gathering his briefcase. We have work to do. And as the car slowed to a stop beneath the steel and glass canopy of Royce Capital, Malcolm stepped out into a different kind of lobby, one where no one questioned whether he belonged. The elevator ride to the top floor of Royce Capital was silent, except for the faint hum of machinery. Malcolm stood with his briefcase in one hand, the reflection of his suit crisp in the mirrored walls. When the doors opened, his assistant, Dana, was already waiting. Sir, I've booked the conference room. Compliance and PR are connected via video. Legal will join in 5. Good, Malcolm said, stepping into the corridor lined with frosted glass. Let's not waste time. Inside the conference room, the monitors lit up with familiar faces, department heads, board members, and the firm's chief compliance officer. Mr. Royce, the compliance chief began. We've reviewed the preliminary footage from Sterling and Rowe. Your actions were within full authority. That's not the issue, Malcolm said, setting his briefcase on the table. The issue is why it happened at all. PR tried to interject. We can frame this as an isolated. It's not isolated, Malcolm cut in. It's systemic, and we treat it as such. He turned to the compliance feed. I want a full audit of every branch. Staff training logs, incident reports, client complaints past 5 years. Understood. Then, Malcolm continued, we identify which branches have leadership that thinks discretion is a license for bias. Those people don't keep their jobs. A silence followed, heavy but not uncertain. Dana tapped her tablet. Sir, media outlets are running a timeline of events. The clip is now at 2.3 million views. Let it run, Malcolm said. Every share is a reminder to our own people about who we are and who we can't afford to be. From one of the monitors, the head of HR asked, do you want us to prepare a formal apology? Malcolm considered. Not for me. For every client who's walked into one of our branches and been treated as if they didn't belong. And it needs to come from corporate, not the branch. We own the failure. We own the apology. The silver-haired woman's voice from earlier echoed in his mind. Silence has a cost. Malcolm glanced around the table, whether in person or on screen. This isn't just damage control. This is policy control. From today forward, every decision on client treatment must be documented, reviewable, and accountable. PR shifted in her seat. That level of transparency will be disruptive. Good, Malcolm said. Disruption is how you wake people up. Dana's phone buzzed, and she leaned in to whisper. Sir, one of the networks wants you live tonight. Decline for now, Malcolm said, closing the black folder from the bank. The cameras can wait, the work can't. He rose, the chair sliding back against the polished floor. We start today, and when we're done, no one in this company will confuse the look of a client for the value of one. The directives went out before the hour was over. By noon, every branch manager in the Sterling and Rowe network had an email marked Urgent Leadership Directive from Chairman Royce. In offices from Boston to San Diego, managers read the subject line twice before clicking. The message was blunt, effective immediately. All client interactions are to be documented and subject to random review. Leadership teams will undergo retraining on bias, discretion, and compliance. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination. It didn't take long for the responses to start coming in. Dana stepped into Malcolm's office with a tablet in hand. "Sir, we've got pushback from 3 regional directors. They're claiming this level of oversight undermines local autonomy." Malcolm didn't look up from the report he was signing. "Then they've just told us where to look first." She smirked faintly. "I thought you might say that." On the 37th floor of the West Coast Regional Office, one director slammed his phone down. "He's overreacting. We can't run branches like this." His assistant, standing quietly in the doorway, said, "Maybe that's the point." Meanwhile, in a Chicago branch, a young teller forwarded the directive to her personal email, with a quiet sense of relief. Finally, she thought. Back at Royce Capital, Caleb entered with fresh updates. "Media's still running the clip. Your quote about resetting the bank is trending." "Good," Malcolm said. "Let the words stick until the actions replace them." On a monitor in his office, social media feeds scrolled in real time. Among the noise were messages from clients, stories of being dismissed, ignored, or questioned for no reason beyond appearance. The parallels were unmistakable. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, scanning one message in particular. "It's not about the money. It's about being treated like you belong." Dana spoke up. "Some staff are nervous. They're afraid of being caught in the middle." "Tell them this isn't a trap," Malcolm said. "It's a mirror. If they're doing their jobs right, they have nothing to fear." The phone on his desk rang. It was the same regional director who'd pushed back hardest. Malcolm answered on speaker. "This is too much, Malcolm. We've run our branch successfully for 15 years without someone breathing down our necks." "Successfully?" Malcolm asked. "Or without being caught?" The silence on the other end was telling. "This isn't about control for the sake of it," Malcolm continued. "It's about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. If you can't stand behind that, you can't stand in that role." The line went dead without a goodbye. Malcolm closed the folder on his desk, the same one he'd carried into the bank that morning. The weight of it hadn't changed, but the reach of its contents had. Outside his window, the city kept moving. Inside, the reset had already begun. 3 days later, the glass-walled boardroom at Royce Capital was filled to capacity. Regional directors, compliance officers, and legal counsel sat around the long table. The atmosphere was tense. Half of the faces in the room carried quiet approval, the other half thinly veiled defiance. Malcolm entered without a folder this time. He didn't need one. Dana followed, placing a single sheet of paper at his seat before taking her place at the side. "Before we start," Malcolm said, his voice carrying without effort, "you should know this isn't a discussion about whether the changes stay. They stay. The only question is who stays with them." A director from the Midwest region leaned forward. "With respect, Mr. Royce, your directives are alienating experienced leaders. We've lost 2 branch managers already this week." Malcolm's eyes didn't waver. "If they left because they couldn't follow a basic standard of respect, we didn't lose anything." A murmur rolled down the table. One of the compliance officers raised a hand. "We've already seen an uptick in self-reported incidents. Staff are speaking up sooner." "That," Malcolm said, "is the start of trust rebuilding itself. It means the culture is changing." The West Coast director who had resisted from day one spoke next. "You're shaking the entire foundation of how we operate. Clients come to us because we're discreet." "Discreet doesn't mean discriminatory," Malcolm countered. "If your definition of discretion allows prejudice, then your foundation needed shaking." Dana slid the single sheet across to him. It was a list short, but heavy in consequence. "These," Malcolm said, tapping the paper, "are the names of leaders who either refuse to implement the new protocols or actively undermine them. As of this meeting, they're relieved of their duties. HR is processing their exits now." Gasps broke the room's forced composure. The West Coast director's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Malcolm stood, resting his palms lightly on the polished wood. "Let me make this simple. You can either lead by example, or you will be replaced by someone who will. There's no third option." From the far end of the table, A soft but firm voice spoke. It was the East Coast director, one of the longest serving in the company. "I've been here 30 years. I've seen leaders talk about change, but not commit to it. This is different. I'm with you." A few heads nodded. The shift was small, but noticeable. Malcolm let the silence settle, the decision hanging in the air. "Good," he said finally. "Then we move forward, together or not at all." He turned to leave, the meeting still buzzing in his wake. Outside the boardroom's glass walls, the skyline stretched in every direction, a reminder that change, like a city, was built one unshakable layer at a time. The sun was beginning to set when Malcolm stepped into his office. The city outside was awash in gold and shadow, skyscrapers catching the last light. Dana entered quietly, a fresh report in her hands. "It's done," she said. "The exits are processed. Interim leaders are in place. Compliance says staff cooperation is higher than expected." Malcolm set his cufflinks on the desk, listening. "And the branches? Some are already running orientation under the new protocols. Clients are noticing. Fewer complaints this week than any first week of a quarter in the past year." He gave a small nod. "Good, that's the start." Dana hesitated, then added, "There's a lot of public reaction to what happened. The video's past 10 million views. You've been called everything from a hero to a tyrant." Malcolm looked out the window. "I'm not here to be called anything. I'm here to make sure no one else walks into one of our buildings and gets treated like I did." For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Dana placed another document on his desk. "A thank you letter from a client in Atlanta. She says she saw the video, and it gave her the courage to file a complaint about a similar incident last year. The branch apologized, and she says she feels like she belongs again." Malcolm read the first lines, then closed the letter gently. "That's why we do it." His phone buzzed. Caleb on the line. "Sir, media still wants you for an exclusive. Primetime slot." "Decline," Malcolm said without hesitation. "Let the story be about what happened, not about me." He rose from his chair, walking to the window. The reflection staring back at him was the same man who had walked into Sterling and Rose Lounge days ago. Sharp suit, steady eyes, but something was different now. The weight of what had been set in motion was there, too. Turning back to Dana, he said, "Schedule a visit to the branches unannounced. I want to see the change for myself." She smiled faintly. "They won't expect you. They didn't last time, either." Outside, the first lights of the city flickered on. Malcolm picked up his briefcase, the same one that had sat beside him during the confrontation. As he stepped toward the door, he spoke not to Dana, not to Caleb, but to the empty room that had witnessed countless decisions. "Power isn't loud, it doesn't have to be, but when it speaks, it leaves no doubt." And with that, Malcolm Royce left his office, not as a man seeking recognition, but as the quiet architect of a culture that would remember his lesson long after the headlines faded.